Okay, and I think this one might be directly off your factoring, which I wanted to do on purpose. Make sure we do one that was factorable, because the factorable ones should have nice answers, no square roots in the answers, and I want you to see that when we complete the square that'll happen as well. So once again, I don't really like this like partial factored nonsense. So I'm going to multiply through 6b squared minus 13b equals negative 6. And I do kind of like that my first step is really done for me, where I isolate the b squared and the b. So I can jump right to my second step, which is before I complete the square, I have to make sure there's a 1 in front of the b squared. So I divide out that 6. Whatever you do to the left, make sure you do it to the right. And I get b squared minus 13 over 6b, that looks horrible, equals negative 1. So that ugly thing, I'm going to have to do my usual trick. Ooh, I don't really like my use of b, because I usually call this b. So I take this and I cut it in half. Remember that dividing something by 2, cutting it in half is the same as multiplying by 1/2, right? So I'm going to get negative 13 over 6 times 1 over 2, which is negative 13 over 12. And then I have to square it, which gives me 169 over 144. Yeah, see that 13 squared, usually I don't think we run into anything higher than that, but up through 13 squared is good to probably just have memorized, because that one sneaks in sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to add 169 over 144 to both sides. So note this is a negative 144 over 144. So I am going to go ahead and simplify that, maybe 144, 54, 64. Ooh, it's actually nice. Okay, so it really is going to work out. This was the factorable one. 169 minus 144 is 25. And the reason I'm excited is because the top and the bottom of that fraction are both perfect squares. So we'll be able to square root it nicely. So this gets a little tricky. We're trying to factor and we're trying to make this perfect square. And when the numbers get really ugly, it can be hard for people to figure out what goes in this spot. So that's where I would remind you just that this number in the parentheses, half of this number is always what goes in that spot. So this is where the 13/12ths are going to show up, so that when you FOIL it out, you get negative 13/12ths b minus 13/12ths b, which is negative 26/12ths b. And negative 26/12ths is the same as negative 13 over 16. So it's messy, it's ugly. Me saying that probably didn't help. It still sounds terrible. But it's half of that middle number that goes in the parentheses when you factor. Okay, so two-step again. I need to get rid of the squaring and then the subtraction. So we're going to square root both sides. And this is where this one is a little bit different. Square rooting both sides still leaves me with a plus or minus, but I can actually do the work and say that's plus or minus 5/12ths. And then I need to add 13/12ths to both sides, plus or minus 5/12ths. Oh my goodness, 5/12ths. There we go. And this is the big warning I wanted to give you. If there was a square root in that answer, I would say, I don't have like terms, I'm done, good answer. There isn't. I actually do have like terms, so we actually need to split this up. This is really giving us two answers, right? I never want you to forget that. So this is saying one of my answers is 13/12ths plus 5/12ths, and one of my answers is 13/12ths minus 5/12ths. And you don't have to write this out the way I do. I'm having a really hard time getting myself to write 12ths apparently. But it's kind of a nice little way to organize it for yourself. So one is the plus and one is the minus, and it doesn't matter which is which. You could switch the top and the bottom is fine. So I get 18 over 12 for the plus. I can divide 6 out of that, and I get 3/2, 1 1/2. And then 8 over 12 for the bottom. 12. Okay. What can I take out of that? 4. Yep, 2/3. Hey, I kind of like it. So these are our answers. 3/2 or 2/3. Okay, so one more. So again, the big deal with that one is just when you get that plus or minus, it doesn't mean you can quit necessarily. If you don't have square roots, you're going to have to keep going.